This episode of Finding Demo Surf Fishing is being brought to you by the Kids Can Fish Foundation. Head on over to kidscanfish.net and take a look at all the really cool things that this family, I mean, is really the best way to say it, are coming together and making an awesome program for kids, helping them get out and fish, learn fishing. They get to go home with something from it, not only from knowledge, but also tangible. They got some rods, they've had cast nets, lots of cool stuff. So kidscanfish.net, head on over there. And hey, while you're there, sign up for the Red Bull SSI Running of the Bulls charity tournament. I'm going to be there. It's going to be a lot of fun. You'll hear more about it. All right. You're listening to Finding Demo Surf Fishing. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well wherever you are. Hope you've been catching a bunch of fish, getting out, trying something new. Maybe you've gone to a different area. That'd be really cool. Love to hear the story about it. So definitely tell us. This week, we're doing another road trip up to Georgia. And we're talking a couple of different things this time. I met this gentleman, Brian. I met him while we were up at the tournament last year and got onto the topic of rods. And all of a sudden, it turns out Brian makes rods. And I was like, huh, okay, this should be fun. Starts telling me about his stuff. Well, then it gets into more fun. Apparently, we're from the same home state, which was really like, wait a minute, what do you got there? Why do you have that number? So that was kind of cool. But yeah, this week we're going to be talking about rod making, fishing, a whole gamut. So without further ado, Brian, welcome to the show, man. I'm so glad to finally have you on.
Yes, it's good to be here for sure.
We've only been talking about this. I mean, we talked about it at the tournament and it was like, yeah, we can do this. And then time. And it was finally like, I had all your questions pretty much ready. And then you messaged me like, hey dude, let's do this. I was like, well, how fortunate is this timing?
Yeah. I mean, when we were talking at the tournament, the fortunate thing is I got a chance to at least check out some of your, the podcasts that you've done and kind of see how they go. And it seems like, I mean, you're doing a great job for sure. I think you're a great podcast host, if that's worth anything.
Well, thank you. I'm going to start blushing, but duck the head a little. It always works. Thanks, man. I'm having a lot of fun with it. And I know you've also played in the podcast world too.
Yeah, a little bit here and there. So where I work, I have a podcast for the particular community that I serve. So
yep.
I try not to talk too much on it because really they're there to listen to the folks that I'm bringing on. But for the most part, we're trying to turn it into more of what this is, more of a conversation than because I'm in, for lack of better words, I'm in law enforcement academia. So we're trying to make it into something where it's more of I prefer the long form, conversation over just somebody briefing something that's it's not that exciting. So
death by briefing is never a good time. You're right up there with PowerPoint. You're like, oh gosh, just make it end.
Yeah, absolutely. So
well, let's get into the fun stuff here, man. You've got a lot of fun things to talk about. I know that. One of them we're going to talk about is Bandit custom rods, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about fishing there and other places that you've been, because you told me you've done quite a bit of fishing on and off for years apparently. But let's start at the beginning. Tell us your story and what got you into fishing.
So I did some fishing growing up. A lot of people have this story where they start off fishing as a kid. I really didn't have that. Growing up, I remember going fishing a few times with my father, and my father I think my father in some ways was probably spoiled, growing up where he did. I mean, he grew up in Fargo, North Dakota. Going to my grandfather's house, I mean, the guy's got a 12-pound walleye on the wall. So
of course.
Yeah, little bit spoiled. But I really didn't get into fishing until after I got home from Iraq in 2004. So that's kind of when I started getting into fishing, and it really didn't get hot and heavy till maybe 06, 07. I did a lot of, just like everybody else, I did a lot of bank fishing and surf fishing. And, I've since graduated. I own a boat. I've owned actually several boats now, but, you buy one, you sell one, that kind of thing. You grow out of one. I think the one I have now, I'm gonna, I've graduated. I have a fiberglass boat now, but it much probably, I don't know if we had this conversation, but I started off fishing the Farmington River in Connecticut. So like the upper Farmington, out in the western part of the state, just trout fishing. And I remember my brother was really into fishing when we were kids. He was fortunate in the sense that when he was a teenager, we had a pond on a golf course that he would trespass onto and go fishing on. I never had that same luxury because I was already in high school by the time we moved to the last house I lived in with my parents. And he got me into fishing the Farmington, and he actually kind of showed me how to bottom bounce in a river. So, as soon as I started bottom bouncing, I would have like these epic 25, 30, can't even count them days. And I thought I was like the best thing since sliced bread because I could catch all these fish on the Farmington River. Looking back, it's like, yeah, you were just, you're catching these essentially dumbed down stock fish.
Yep.
Just murdering them, and then, moving forward, I got into other things. I ended up moving up to upstate New York. I did a lot of salmon, steelhead, and brown trout, big brown trout in the spring. And by that point, I had, owned a boat or two. So I really got into muskie fishing. Interesting group of people. You have a problem when you end up spending, $35 to $40 on a bait that's not even a good bait. You know what I mean? It's like that's an okay bait. But I mean, like my buddy, I'll plug this. My buddy Andrew's muskie baits. I've never actually owned one of his baits because I don't think I probably couldn't afford them. But I mean, he makes such nice baits, and for muskie guys are kind of psychotic. I might get like a fatwa or something called out of my life for saying this, but
you might.
Those guys,
you very well might.
Yeah. I was one of them. So, the amount of money you can spend on that particular hobby is it's astronomical, I think, compared to any other type of fishing out there. I think the only thing that would maybe rival that amount of money spent in fishing is maybe like offshore stuff. And because you can just go nuts, and all the money's in the baits, and some of the money's in the rods and reels and stuff like that, but most of it's in the baits. I mean, but if you've never experienced it, what you have to understand about it is there is nothing more thrilling on the planet, hands down, than having a 20 or 30 pound fish hit a bait while you're doing a figure eight next to the boat. I mean, there's nothing else out there that's like that. Because the fish, you got to keep your wits about you, because the fish will come out of nowhere and it'll just scare the bejesus out of you. I remember the first time I had a muskie follow a bait to the boat, and then just kind of pop up underneath it while I was taking the bait out of the water, and he slashed at it. That's when I got on, I think it was, I got on the internet and, tried to figure out, okay, how do you deal with that scenario? And then I learned the whole figure eight thing, and, doing different patterns, circle patterns in the water, speeding it up, slowing it down. And I actually got like halfway decent at, figure eighting them and stuff. But there's no better, in my opinion, there's no more instant adrenaline rush than muskie fishing. And of course, I
Right.
did walleye, and walleye was more of like fishing for flounder here, where it's like I'm just going out and trying to get a meal. Walleye's fun, but it's not musky fun. I'll tell you that. And then, of course, steelhead as far as light tackle fishing goes. And I know West Coast guys will be like, that's not steelhead fishing on the Great Lakes or whatever. But you hook up on a 8-10 pound trout and fight them in a river. I mean, it's especially in the fall when they're doing acrobatics and trying
Yeah,
to throw your hook. That's a good time.
for sure it is.
Yeah.
Well, let's ask you this then. Now that you've been doing that, you've done a lot of fishing in many different places there. What type of fishing do you like to do now?
So I like doing a lot of inshore fishing here specifically. I this year is I've kind of resolved myself to this. I got to put more triple tail on the boat. Um, that's kind of it's a meal and it's exciting because it's not targeting the really big ones is not easy to do inshore. Here, you kind of got to know what you're doing. You got to put in your time, which, for me, it was a lot like musky fishing or steelhead fishing. You had to put your time in and, then reap the rewards from it.
That's the weird thing about putting the time in too is, I mean, everyone is all like, oh, that, let me rephrase that. A lot of people that I've talked to that have mentioned the time thing, they're either they're saying it or they're on the receiving end. And some of them are like, oh, I'm just getting hazed because I'm the new guy, or I'm not getting, they don't respect me. And it's like, no, that putting your time in just means learning from your mistakes. They're not going to get all the stuff in one sitting. Go put your time in and go find out. Go find out the hard way on a couple of things. Here's some nuggets of knowledge. Now go find out.
Well, one of the things I'll say about people in general when you're fishing is there are guys out there, and we all know them, who will just they'll look for information. They want the exact spot, the exact bait, the exact time to go target a particular species. And my view on that is that if you bring something to the table, I might give you that information. If you don't bring anything to the table, if you're some kind of, I guess for lack of better words, Guggen, where you're not recognizing that you're brand new to this and you're not putting the work in, I'm probably I'm not gonna give you the help that you desire. I'll give you help, but I'm not gonna give you the help that you want, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense because that's just what it is. So it's not a bad one there. All right. Now let's go. Let's keep going down the background and we'll move into the fishing a little bit here. What's your favorite thing about fishing?
What's my favorite thing about? Well, I so for me it's the technical aspect of fishing. It's trying to figure out, not necessarily that I'm catching fish. It's I'm always learning something in the sense that if I'm not catching fish, there's something to learn there. Okay, what are the conditions? Here, and we'll talk about it later, but there are certain conditions here in Southeast Georgia that just make for better fishing. But my favorite thing is trying to figure out why are fish in this particular spot right now. What's drawing them there? Is it the structure? Is it the food? Is it some combination? What kind of effect does the current have on that? Because here that's a big a big consideration.
Yeah, you guys have a
So
serious flow of water on your tides, but also from the rivers and the back ones. You guys got a lot of movement.
yeah, and it actually makes Southeast Georgia probably one of the gems in the rough as far as fishing, because you can't. We always joke about if a guy from Louisiana, like a guy that fishes like southern Louisiana for redfish and whatnot, if they come here, they're going to swing and miss. And it's not that the fish aren't here; it's not southern Louisiana. You have way different conditions to deal with here than you do there. And, you know, I'm going to say this about the southeast coast of the United States, basically from, you know, what is it, Cape Hatteras, or not Cape, like, was it Cape Hatteras, the one that the
Yeah.
point that sticks out in North Carolina? So Cape Hatteras,
The point,
essentially
but
the
yes,
Cape,
down in Hatteras.
yeah, Cape Hatteras to Cape Canaveral. You could go 10 miles along the shore and have a different experience, different
Yeah, oh,
conditions.
yeah.
Whereas
Oh,
if you
yeah.
get south of Canaveral, it's like, it's kind of all the same till you get down into the Keys, and it's good, but it's the conditions. You can kind of replicate things, you know. I guess that's the beauty about here is it's hard. It's hard fishing. It's not because the fish aren't there. It's just we have a particular, you know, particular conditions. Like we have really dirty water a lot of the time. So the challenge for us is finding clean water. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah. When I was talking to Seth about that, he was all about the clean water, and then all I could keep bringing back in my mind was, it wasn't clean water when I visited y'all. But it was still really impressive watching so many different things and then learning more about your guys' fishery and that whole area. I mean, it's quite the outdoorsman's happy place.
Yeah, once you figure it out, it's I mean, there's it number one, it kind of keeps people away from it. It keeps the, you know, this place from becoming like South Florida, where it's just like everybody's fishing, you know. And, you know, if I'm going to go anywhere and go to the beach, it's not St. Simon's or Jekyll Island, I'll tell you that. Not that I'm a beach goer at all, but I do like the fishing here for sure because of the, you know, there's some technical difficulty. There's also some there's a lot of mystery that I like to talk to. You know, it provides for some good conversation points. Talking to your friends that fish, like what do they think about it? The whole clean water thing, I didn't come up with that on my own. That was somebody had, you know, a charter captain friend of mine had said that, you know, it's all about the clean water, and then I started picking up on that pattern and started being more successful that way. So.
No. Now, ladies and gentlemen, yes, you heard him right. He's not much of a beach guy. There's a reason he's on the podcast. Don't freak out.
No, I'll go to the beach and fish. Trust me.
Right.
I'm not going to the beach to go swimming. Not here.
That's where I was going with
it. Not because it's dirty. It's just I watched Jaws as a kid, and that's the problem, right?
That's a fair. Hey, I've got no judgment. That's why I was saying, don't worry. He still fishes. It's all good. Don't freak out. He still goes. All right. We're moving down here. We're getting right through it. What is a bucket list fish that you want to catch someday?
Oh man, I want to get out and catch some mahi. It's disconcerting that the rods that I build catch fish that I've never actually put hands on before.
Dude, I never thought of that. Oh
yeah,
man.
Yeah, my rods have had crazy stuff on. Yeah, wahoo, sailfish, that all stuff that I've never caught before. Wahoo, sailfish, like one of the ones last year was like strawberry. I think it's strawberry grouper or something.
I just heard about that not too long ago from Reed the fishmonger, I believe his name is.
African pompano.
That was cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm waiting. I want to get I want somebody to get a marlin at some point, but I'd really like to get out and get some mahi at some point. I've had a couple of opportunities, but you know, sometimes the day job gets in the way. Let's put it that way. So,
yeah. Unfortunately, that's just how the game gets played. All right. Well, let's ask you the last question here, and then we're going to start moving into the other ones here. What has been one of your very favorite fishing memories?
Going to Canada and fishing with my father, my uncles, and my grandfather. That's for sure. Yeah. Wow. We would go to Manitoba every couple of years and fish in I always said that the places we would go in Canada, if you stopped the boat, right, and there was no wind, the all I would hear was tinnitus, and you're ringing, ringing in your ears. And that's how you know you're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we would go I mean, I guess by Canadian terms, it's not that far north, but it's the place that we would go is about 8 hours drive north of Winnipeg, Manitoba, and just big lake chain, lake trout, big northern pike, big walleye. The place is literally it's like heaven on earth.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So that was so lots of good memories were made on that trip with the family then, huh?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've gone a number of times, and every time it's like it's good. There was one year I went in I think it was 2014. We couldn't go in the spring because my uncle had passed away, one of my uncles, and then we ended up going in the fall, and there was I ended up putting 5 Manitoba trophy northern pike in the boat that week. So
wow,
fish over 40 inches. So it was definitely a good trip. So
very nice. Well, I'm a little jelly there. I'd love to go fish up in that area, but this is perfect timing. We're moving into the next section, but before we do that, we can just go ahead and knock this out real fast. I mean, why not? It is the very first bait check of the episode. Hopefully you've caught some fish by now. Hopefully it's all going great, man. It's just the perfect day. Actually, you probably limited out and you're already in the car 22 minutes into the show. That's what it is. This bait check is being brought to you by the Sinker Guy. Head on over to thesinkerguy.com and take a look at everything Chip's got going on in the Sinker Guy garage. Need sinkers? It's in his name. He's got you covered. Different sizes. If you need special orders, reach out to him. He can discuss that option with you. Maybe you need some rigs. He's got you set up. The old Bruno rig, been doing a lot of good things, but he's also got other rigs in there too. If you need tackle supply and any kind of that stuff, he's got it in there with a few other things that you might not expect that you might need for fishing. Go take a look. Sinkerguy.com. Get your order in today. So now we're moving on to the beach. Now we're into the old fishing tips, tricks, and knowledge section. All right. So how do you plan your fishing trips?
So so for here in Southeast Georgia, as long as the wind is not more than 10 knots out of the northeast, I'm out fishing. So
that northeast.
as long as I'm not stuck in here doing this stuff, which sometimes I am, but I tend to, I don't care too much about rain or, because I've had some good days fishing in the rain. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much that. And then, of course, obviously seasonal movements of particular fish. Like I like fishing the beach for trout during particular times of the year. I'll go out. I go down to St. Augustine a couple times a year for work. So I'll go down to the pier. Some of you have the Volano Pier there. I don't know if you've ever been. Have you ever been over the Volano Pier?
No, I've seen it, but I've never been.
Tom from Kids Can Fish, they run a surf camp, and actually the surf camp they just ran was over on Volano Beach.
Okay.
So yeah, I do some surf fishing over there, and I'm usually when I'm out there, and I guess this goes into the next question: how do we select spots? Really what I'm looking for. I
gotta stop sending you guys these questions. That's it. Blind shots.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I get into I'm looking at what the waves are doing, right? Because I'm looking for those troughs where those holes are, where those fish don't have to fight so hard to get the food. And then also obviously with the currents and the water coming in and going out, the bait or the food tends to pool in those particular areas, and it's almost like it's meant to be. But those are the washouts and some of the holes. That's the stuff I'm really looking for. So I'll sit on the beach for maybe 10 or 15 minutes and just watch. and see what the surf is doing. And then, especially a lot of times when I'm down there, I'm picking a piece of beach that I've never fished before. So, and
Nice.
just go out and see what happens.
Well, you talked about how do you select the spot, so you already got that. Way to go. Nice move in there. How do you set your gear up when you're in the spot? So let's talk about that one. When you motioned words, not good at them. You mentioned the holes, the runouts, and stuff like that. So when you've got your spot picked, where are you casting your lines?
So I'm going to generally cast past the spot where I want to put the bait, and then reel it back to where I need it to go, and then let it set. And I'll set out probably, depending on where I am, maybe 2 lines, maybe 3 lines, depending on whether it's legal or not. And then and kind of put them at different areas around that spot that I want to fish, and see kind of what works. But yeah.
Playing the zones is always key right there. With your guys' massive tidal movement, what have you found for you and that area for fishing tides? What do you like?
So I'm a big fan of first hour in, first hour out, and then the opposite. So that 2 hour window at the top or the bottom of the tides, and it depends on the. So if I'm fishing from my boat, it depends on the spot, right? What I found is, fishing some of the drops meaning like some of the drop offs near the channels and stuff like that, when the tide's low, is productive, because those fish are just waiting to get back up, essentially get back up to feed on the beds. And then when the water's up, up high, I'm fishing on structure essentially.
Okay.
That could change, spot to spot essentially. But the same is true fishing from the beach. The tides, it's that 2 hour sweet spot at the top, at the bottom of the tides. Those are generally, especially if I'm going to hit a new spot, those are generally the spots, the times where I'm going to hit them for sure.
Makes absolute sense. I mean, water movement's huge. What do you? So I always love this one for you guys in this area, talking about moon phases. And the only thing I know about your area is a supermoon, so I know nothing else about that. Have you found anything good or bad depending on your moon phase?
Stay away from them, I guess. I tend to, look, I'll go out on a new moon or a full moon, but I'm very picky on where I'm going to go.
Okay.
That's just, because the tide's moving so hard, and especially if it's been rainy, because of all the runoff, and it dirty. The water's going to be dirty on a big moon anyways.
Yeah.
But there are some spots in Southeast Georgia that you can go hit, and it'll be actually probably not bad and pretty productive. The key there is just the water clarity. For me, it's not necessarily the moon cycle affecting the feeding. It's the moon cycle affecting the water clarity, affecting fish being able to see what they're eating.
Makes sense.
What I will say is that's different when you're talking about redfish. When you're talking about redfish, you could, you almost want the moon, right? The full moon or the new moon, because the water's moving, and especially bull redfish, that's some of the best fishing for bull redfish that I've had here is when you got a moon. That's for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I always see the full moon and I'm instantly, I have two thoughts now. I used to only have one. The full moon for us in fishing, we're like, all right, they've been chewing all night, so you better be ready to go first thing in the morning or right at the evening, because they're not going to be that hungry. And then the other one for us military one is, full moon. Yep. Highlight level NVG training time. Let's go. We're going to be out for hours. So it always screws with me when I think of full moon. So we talked moon phases. Now, you mentioned trout, and I skipped a question I forgot to ask you, so I'm going to ask it and then ask this next one. What type of fish do you like to target up there?
I like a lot of different things. So my passion this year is going to be triple tail for sure.
Right.
I put some effort in a year or two ago. I had some success with it, kind of figured some things out, but I I was talking to a friend of mine who Chad Hodges. He owns 4 Leaf fishing charters, so he does a lot of like his primary thing is flounder, but gigging. So he does a lot of guiding for that. And I was talking to him recently. He I guess Triple Tail sent him to a dark place at some point.
Oh, no.
That's yeah, it's all he could think about,
Oh,
So
no.
I can understand that because Steelhead sent me to that same place at one point when I was learning how to fish for him. So we both decided that like this year it's going to be we got to put the time aside, and there's kind of a window to catch them. Just putting the time aside and having a backup plan in case you're not going to be able to get into them, or they're just not the conditions aren't right or whatever. But again, the key is getting out there. You don't know unless you go, I guess.
Right.
So yeah.
So the triple tail game for you is from the boat. You're not doing that from the beach.
Yeah. Can you catch them from the beach?
You can.
Yeah, I've seen it.
I've
You
heard.
I don't know that it's a reliable venture. I don't think
I don't
you can
think
go
it
out to
is.
the beach right now on Jekyll Island and go hang out with like Seth and Kevin Albeck and do some shark fishing. There's definitely sharks out there.
Yes.
Trout in certain areas, especially this is no secret. The pier behind Jekyll Island, they got a creek there that
Mhm.
comes out, and they have some pretty decent trout days there. But up on the surf side, obviously our big thing out there is when the bull redfish runs. So
Right.
obviously you've experienced that.
No, I haven't. I caught the baby. I haven't caught the bull red. Remember, I got the tiny. I am the king of the smalls. Don't take that from me, sir.
Well, you got something out of it, buddy.
I did. That was a lot of fun. I mean, granted, a lot of people will make, oh, wow, you got the smallest fish. No, I'm going to run that like I just won the lottery. I am piping this up forever. So that was a lot of fun. Well, all right. So you're going after triple tail. And like you said, you're going after the beaches there. So with those ones, you mentioned from the beach, but let's back up this one. What type of rigs do you normally use when you're fishing at the beach?
So I'll use a dropper, like a dropper loop rig. Usually I'll do like a single. I found that like the doubles are cool, but if I'm going scouting, I don't want, I'm not going to need more than one hook essentially.
Yep.
If I was going to go to an area that I knew real well, and I knew that if I wanted to say bring, put some food on the table or something, then I would probably. But usually I'll go out there, I'll tie up like a single dropper loop rig, maybe on a piece of 60-pound fluoro, and throw a K hook on there or something with whatever the bait. Like the last time I was in St. Augustine, I was using just dead shrimp.
Yeah.
Kind of the veritable catch-all bait is dead shrimp. And then usually what I do is I'll throw some like a fish bite strip. I'll cut a fish bite strip, and just to keep that, because shrimp will just fall off. But that and so I usually have like a 12 or an 18-inch, lead off of that dropper down to. Yes, I'll plug the sinker guy. I've been using his Sputniks, man. They're good.
They are. I love his stuff. But a good plug back.
Usually, in most places that I go, especially down in St. Augustine, most of the places that I go is like 4 ounce usually does it for me. On bigger moons, or like you're getting close to the full moon or close to the new moon, you might have to bump it up to 6 in the area that I fish, at least. Usually when I'm fishing like the Volano Pier or something, I'll stick 4 ounces, just enough for me. I likely could downgrade, go a little bit lighter at the pier, but it just depends on the day.
It makes sense. Well, all right, so you nailed onto this one. So let's get into the traveling a little bit here. What do you do when you want to go fishing in a new place?
Google Earth. I'll look at Google Earth and Navionics.
Nice one.
That's what I look at. The rest of it, frankly, obviously do a little bit of research on the internet, kind of figure out what's there. The other thing too is there's value in this, but you got to be able to have your wits about you when you walk into a tackle shop. I'll go into a tackle shop and I'll ask some strategic questions and see what the answers are going to be. I'm not going to ask them like, what's biting, right? Because when you say I'm dead serious. When you say what's biting, the first thing that comes to mind, especially the nefarious bait shop owner's mind, is I could sell this guy anything right now.
That's why I'm laughing, because it's that setup.
Yeah. It's so Latin terms, right? Like caveat emptor and caveat venditor, right? So may the buyer beware, may the seller beware. I want the seller to beware, right? That's what I want when I walk into a tackle shop. Now there are like places that I trust, like there's a guy down in St. Augustine Paddle Sports. I've been in his shop a couple times, and he seems to be, like, to me, a straight shooter. Here in Brunswick, there's really not much as far as tackle shops go, so you're really stuck with Academy. But when I go to a new spot, I'm definitely going to go to the tackle shop, but I'm going to be prepared with, specific questions so I don't get sold a bunch of stuff that I don't need, right?
Right. Makes sense. So how do you adjust your tactics for fishing when the bite is just not on fire?
Am I still catching fish, Bri? Is that it?
Ooh, see, normally when it's not on fire, I always go back to that nothing is happening at all. So I'm gonna throw it into the other one. You're not catching right now. You're not catching, but you plan to get out there and go get some.
Couple of theories, and it depends on. So with the surf, right? With the surf specifically, you could have, if you've got a falling tide or a rising tide, those conditions are changing by the minute, right? The thing that used to be the washout isn't a washout anymore. It's just water, right? So there's no reason for those fish to hang out there. And, the hole you were fishing is still a hole, but it's a much deeper hole, and those fish have moved out because the food's not there anymore, or the trough, or whatever you want to call it. So with surf fishing, I tend to move around a little bit more, and kind of eyeball the current conditions. With fishing from a boat, and again, it depends on what I'm fishing for. There are some instances where I know they're going to be back around. It's just a matter of time. And that's just based on experience, especially with bull redfish. They're going to, there's certain spots where you can go and you can, you could lay a bait down and nothing will happen for an hour. And then all of a sudden, you're doubling up, tripling up on the boat, and, it gets crazy. So it depends on the type of fishing. With the beach, I'm going to move around a little bit more, only because, the dynamics on the beach are constantly changing. But for those same reasons, I mean, you could have the tactic that it's like, well, I'll stay. That might work. But the way I deal with it is I'll start moving and looking for some of those telltale areas. When you're looking and you're reading the water, you can find where the fish are most likely to be.
Makes sense. All right, well, walk us through the seasons over there. Bring us through the seasons and what fishing's like through them for you.
So in the spring, we have, we're coming out of the winter time. So usually what I'm doing is I'm transitioning. I like fishing some of the trout spawn, that kind of area. So they're up on some of the beaches here. You'll have the trout will come up pretty close to the beach. So I like fishing that. I like fishing it from the shore, and I also like fishing it from a boat. So that's usually pretty good. And then, spring fishing, into the summer, I'm getting more into, I'll fish for sharks a couple of times in the summer. It's usually when family's down and they want to do something. Sometimes I'm fishing.
Some people like to catch the big ones.
Yeah, I mean, and sharks are fun, I guess. If you haven't had one try to eat your boat, they're actually
yes.
fun. And not big enough.
I'm guessing this has happened.
Yeah, not big enough to like actually eat the boat, but big enough that there are still scars on my fiberglass or my gel coat from where the thing tried to eat part of my boat, like eat the gunnel, like
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, but summer for me is for inshore fishing is a lot of trout. I would say I like targeting trout in the summer. Going into the fall, that's when I'm kind of transitioning into, again, more trout. In the fall, I'm more into the flounder and kind of trying to pick up either flounder from the beach or flounder from the boat. Mostly from the boat in the fall for sure. Into the winter actually for me is probably some of the most exciting months here in Southeast Georgia. It gets, I guess, cold by Georgia standards, and you get a lot of species like sheephead. If you're going to target them from a boat, you get a lot of, and you can target sheephead from the shore. Like there's the pier up on Jekyll Island has a spot on the north end of the pier. I mean, I'll throw it out there. There's some rocks over there, and if you hit it right, you can pick up sheephead. There's some rocks on the north. There's like a northern arm of that pier. I'll tell you exactly where it is, but you'll have to figure it out.
It won't be hard to figure out, it sounds like.
No, it's not hard. But there's definitely sheephead there for sure. There's the wintertime. Again, the wintertime for me is probably the best time because there's a lot more, I think, species, especially at the beginning of the winter. There's a point like in the dead of winter where it's dead for like 2 or 3 weeks. That's my experience. So I have a pattern that I live by. I get skunked once a year, and it's been that way since probably, knock on wood, it's been that way since about probably 2012, where I get skunked once a year, and it's almost always in the wintertime here. When I was in New York, and I'd get skunked opening day. I mean, that's just the rule. I mean, you probably know, like growing up in Connecticut, you get skunked, and I get skunked opening day every single year. But here, I get skunked once, and it's usually in the dead of winter. But then once I get past that, my next trip is usually like, it's either okay, decent, or it's like gangbusters. So,
oh boy,
I know Tom and I have had some pretty crazy days fishing in the wintertime. So, Tom Lewis from Kids Can't Fish, we're out there killing it.
It sounds like fun. Well, there you go, people. Now you know the seasons for that area. So, all right, now is going to be the fun one. We've finished up that section. Before we can move to the next one, obviously we got to do a bait check here. But next section, we're going to be talking about actually Brian's little garage action you're seeing in his office there. We're going to be talking about that. Definitely. It is your second bait check of the episode. So hopefully you've got a bunch of fish. That'd be awesome. Reel that line back in, make sure you're good. If you need to rebait, set it up. If you haven't caught anything yet, switch it up to something else. Change it up the pattern a little bit, help yourself out. This bait check is being brought to you by Ninja Tackle. And over to ninjatackleva.com. And I don't know, fall in love, if you will, with all the fun stuff that you can get your hands on there through Matt. They've got rods from 7 foot to 12 foot. He has Akios on there, Akios reels as well. If you're into the spin or conventional style, I still can't cast them. I bird's nested every single time. It doesn't matter what I do. It's always a mess. I'm not very good at that. Or if you need to get your hands on rigs, he's got them in there. You can also, if you're into firearms or any kind of firearm accessories, he's got Ninja Tactical. That's also through ninjatackleva.com. You can pick up a lot of really cool stuff in there. And if you have questions, always reach out to Matt. He's always very responsive. All right. So let's talk about Bandit custom rods. This is the fun stuff here. All right. What made you want to get into making rods?
So I had a friend of mine. He actually moved from. I knew him when I was living in Connecticut. I was going to college in between stints on active duty and in the military, and I ran into him, kind of hung out with him a little bit, and then he took off. At the time, I think he was working for like the FAA or something as an air traffic controller. Well, he took off and went down to South Florida. What I didn't know when he was living in Connecticut was he served in the Navy, and he got into like a kind of a bad accident, and a guy at Bethesda actually was there, like just teaching people how to build rods, and he was the only one that was interested in it. So he started learning from him, and then when he moved to, I think he lived down at like Fort Myers or something, he started a business down there, a rod building business, on top of doing the air traffic control thing full time. And one day he called me up and he was like, "Hey man, I see you're, I used to guide when I was in New York part time. We could talk about that, but kids, if you want to be a charter captain someday, like just be prepared." I decided that guiding is fun and it's cool, but listen, it's the amount of, it's not worth the, whatever money you make, you're not going to make that much.
It gets reinvested.
Yeah, you have the guys that I know here are making money, but they've also put a lot of, like, it's not just the fact that you're good at fishing. You got to be have good customer service. Me, my customer service was okay. I did a little bit of guiding up there, and got my guide's license and all that stuff. And more or less, it wasn't worth the headache, especially where I was guiding, because you're competing against all these other guys, and they're not the nicest people in the world, and the amount of stress, like I didn't have to catch fish to put food on the table, put it that way.
That's good.
So I just kind of left it to them, and I did it for a couple of years, and it was okay, but whatever. So Dan calls me up and he's like, "Hey, I see you're guiding, and why don't you build your own fishing rods?" And I was like, "Ah, man, come on, like." It's I guess that sounds cool, but it sounds expensive. And I started doing the research and essentially came to the conclusion that yes, it is expensive, but you get to build what you want. And at that point, I really started getting hot and heavy into musky fishing. And anybody that's done that before knows that, when you're tossing a 6 or an 8-ounce bait 1,000 times in a day, it matters what rod you're using, for sure. And so I kind of started off there, started building my own rods, and it was more about the rod itself and what I was going to do with it than the actual art of it. So that's kind of how I started out. So I wanted to know, okay, so what's the best, what are the best guides? What's the best guide spacing? What's, like what should my rear handle length be? Because that's a big, concern. What kind of components do I use? Do I use graphite? Do I use aluminum? Do I use, and then I've developed a lot of theories over the years building rods. Like you'll hear guys out there that'll talk about like the balance of the rod. Like they'll be in the store balancing the rod. Listen, unless you're a professional bass fisherman, like that doesn't matter, right? You casting all day, like once a weekend, that's not gonna tire you out. That extra quarter of an ounce on the tip that makes the rod tip just fall just a little bit, but you'll see these guys like trying to find out where the balance point on the rod is. Like that's a big consideration. I would say unless you're doing it day in, day out professionally, it's not really a thing that you should concern yourself with. You waste a lot of time at bait shops trying to find balance points on rods. That's just my 2 cents about it. But it's things like that, where I'm trying to dissect what it is to make a rod that does a particular job, right?
Okay.
I think most people start off when they go to the store, they go down to Academy, they go to, Strike Zone down in Jacksonville, they go to whatever your favorite tackle shop is, and they want the rod that does everything. And there is no
Don't we all?
Yeah. We don't have the technology. So
not yet. We're not there yet.
Not yet. Yeah. I'm in trouble if we get that technology, by the way, because that's kind of my business model.
That definitely fits in the model of, no, I need it to be this. That makes that. Okay, so your friend got you into it and then you started on the musky side, and then did it do any kind of other changing from there, or what made the evolution?
Yeah, I mean, it got into, walleye and bass, and I was designing rods specifically for particular kinds of baits. Like I designed a rod for literally just fishing big spinner baits and spoons for northern pike and muskies. That's all this rod was ever designed to do. And it had everything to do with the what type of guides I put on there. Because if you're anybody who's spinnerbait fished before, if your rod is too heavy, what ends up happening is you don't know when you have weeds on your blades. And when you got weeds on your blades, you're not catching fish, because that blade's what's bringing that fish in, right? It's what's attracting that bass or that pike or, whatever it is. So I designed a rod that was sensitive enough to feel those big blades moving in the water. And we're talking like ounce to 2 ounce, like big, spinner baits. And then, spoons.
That is so
big,
cool.
Yeah. So something that's strong enough and it's got enough backbone to, essentially put the boots to a big fish, and it's sensitive enough at the tip, and you can get a sense real quick when you're reeling in if you've got a lure full of weeds, so that way you can get it back to the boat faster, get it cleaned up, and then send it again. So just, I guess, an example of kind of that's how I take my approach to building rods. It's more or less, okay, what do you want it to do at the end of the day? What do you want that rod to do specifically? What are you targeting? With the offshore game, it's a little bit different because, that's more of there's basically 3 or 4 different kinds of rods out there that you can use to fish offshore. I mean, you've got your big rods for your tuna. That's like kind of one class, tuna, sailfish, and there's little intricacies in there, but for the most part, you can go offshore with a 40-pound line class rod, with a 6,000 size reel, and jig fish up off the bottom. Except when you get into the more specialty stuff like slow pitch jigging and things of that nature. And then even with, surf rods, like the surf rods that I've built over the years, I've built everything from, 13-foot shark catching, 13-ounce lure weight, like 14-ounce or 16-ounce lure
Holy
weight.
crap, dude. That's
Oh yeah,
huge.
man. Yeah. And then getting into like I don't do as much surf fishing as you guys do, but one of my favorite builds that I did was for a Navy kid who's he's not a Kevin, he's a 20-something-year-old man, but he's out of St. Mary's. I did a build for him, and I had never heard of this before. It's a South African style surf rod. Are you familiar with? Have you ever heard of that?
So when I interviewed Sean Meyer out of South Africa, I didn't even talk to him about it, but then I started noticing his rods are different in these pictures. They look different than ours.
So, and I'm not totally educated on the history of it or whatever, but it's my understanding it started off actually in the country next door. So I think it's called Namibia. It's the country that's just to the west, along the western coast of Africa, that they started using or having these rods built that had. So like normally with a surf rod, you've got like some honking back end to the thing, right? So like a 18 to 24 inch butt on the thing, right? Or even bigger than that. With South African style, you're talking about like kind of generally speaking, if you're going to throw it in a ballpark, it's like a 10 or a 12 inch rear grip. Yeah. And the way they if you've ever watched it, you got to go on YouTube and watch it. The way they cast those rods is kind of it's just different. But that technique made it to somewhere in Southern California, and someone started building those rods in Southern California, or some custom rod builder started. This Navy kid, his name's Nick. He was stationed out there, and this guy, he paid for a guided trip from this guy that fished with those rods and kind of fell in love with them. And the advantage is that when you're shark fishing, most of the guys here are going to be using like a conventional, and if they get it from me, it's usually acid wrapped, meaning it's a spiral wrap. So instead of having all the guides on the top of the blank, it spirals and puts the line on the bottom, so you have more kind of control over the fish. It turns it more into a spinning rod, even though you still have a conventional reel. But most of those guys are fishing, unibutts, big aluminum butts with the honking $1,000 crazy reels and stuff. And I still got to get out there with Seth. I know you had Seth on. I got to get out there with Seth and Kevin and do some of that. I'm really curious how that goes, how those guys all do it. Because all I see are like drones and kayaking, and those guys they're nuts for sure. I forget. I don't know if it was Seth. I think it was the first time I met Seth, and I might have this wrong. He came to the shop, and he had some like gnarly like wound on his leg. Oh, and I remember looking at it, and I'm like, "What the heck is going on with your leg, man?" And he said, "He's like, oh, he got like tail flapped by a shark, right?"
Oh,
so, yeah, he got that like that's sandpaper, the sandpaper thing going on, and then he ended up in the hospital. Yep. Like that's the event that my wife would probably be like, "You're done, you're not, you're not doing this anymore." Yeah. But anyways, to round out the whole South African style,
okay.
If you're gonna fish for big sharks with a spinning rod, one of the hard things that you're gonna run into is being able to plant yourself to fight that fish, right? Because those guys that are fishing those big conventional outfits, they're sitting in a harness and they're reeling down. when you have a honking, 2-foot rear grip on a surf rod, you got to be up here and reeling down. What that does is it puts it down closer to where you as a human being, kind of your best leverage points, right about here as far as rods go. So it makes total sense, but the casting is something that you have to get used to. It's almost like, I'll probably upset some people, but it's almost like learning how to fly fish. Some guys out there like, it's not like learning how to fly fish. It's like, okay, but you get the idea, right?
Right.
It's just a different way of doing things. So just, some of the things, that South African stuff though, is kind of fascinating, especially how they build rods in other countries. I follow a couple guys, I think, on Instagram, just looking at kind of some of the stuff that they're doing. I think what's cool about the technology we have now, especially with, rod building, I don't have to read about something in Rod Maker magazine that I subscribe to, I can just find it on YouTube and go, oh, that's cool. That's a cool technique. I think I'll try that.
Well, that's cool that you've done that. I mean, playing with different styles. I mean, I'd say not a lot of our fellow anglers would be like very comfortable to switch up butts into that different style, especially a different type of rod, because it is different casting. But down there for wherever people are, once they start something, they fall in love with it. They have a tendency to just stay with it. So I totally understand that. Before we move on, let's knock out our last bait check of the episode, because I know we got more to talk about rods. Oh, we do. Well, that's it. This is your third and final bait check of the episode. Hopefully you've caught a bunch of fish. That's what we want, man. Catch the fish. After an hour, limit it out. Isn't that like the ultimate goal? In, out, and done? Unless you need a day at the beach, in which case I totally understand. This bait check is being brought to you by DS Custom Tackle. DSCustomTackle.com has you completely covered for all of your rig making and let's see, I don't know, supplying needs. That's right, they got you covered. Beads, floats, terminal tackle, lots of great stuff in there. Jigs, they have those in there. Teasers, lots of different pieces that you can get your hands on. So again, go on over to dscustomtackle.com, take a look at everything, get yourself a good order, build your next set of rigs. Nothing wrong. You're going to catch fish. It's a win. So we've started talking about these rods, and you've definitely on those. Now let's talk about your rods that, I mean, we got a bunch we can look at, obviously, and I know you do a lot with charity with the Kids Can Fish. You've been a very well-known, and I believe Caroline has a specific rod series, if I'm not mistaken, which I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. Anyway, let's talk about them, man. Show me some of your rods.
Yeah, so the one that's the one that's on the bench right now is actually for Sammy, Seth's son. This is it's an 8'10". The company, the blank manufacturer they're called Batson Enterprises. They own a line called Rain Shadow. They're out of Washington State. I'm a big I like building on Rain Shadow. There's a couple of different brands out there that I like building on. This particular one's a Rain Shadow. The other brand that I like building on is American Tackle. They're out of Orlando, or Oviedo, I think is the name of the town in Florida.
I think it is
outside of Orlando. Yeah. They're actually, so if you're familiar with Mudhole Custom Tackle, so if you're going to start rod building yourself, you're probably going to end up in one of two places, right, that you can buy from. It's either Get Bit Outdoors, which they're out of somewhere in Florida, and then Mudhole, which is in Oviedo. But American Tackle is actually like physically next door to Mudhole. But I like building on mostly Rain Shadow and American Tackle stuff. I built on a number of different brands. I like the fact that American Tackle and Batson have such a kind of wide range of different blanks that I can choose from. And I kind of know when I'm buying them, I know what the quality is going to be like. Whereas if I go to, say, Mudhole and I pick out like a blank that I know the name brand of, but I've never built on it before, I'm not really sure what it's going to do, right? And it's easier for me as a as a manufacturer, to be able to reach out and poke somebody in the eye. If, so I have a sales guy at Batson, and I have a sales guy at American Tackle. So if something goes wrong, and very rarely does it go wrong, but I have somebody I can go, hey man, this thing's not right. And both companies have made, they've made it right every single time I've had an issue. So, and then of course, like, I've fished these particular blanks for years. My good friend Kevin DeZern from Georgia Saltwater Adventures, he's a charter captain here. He fishes a lot of my stuff for like bull redfish and things of that nature. And that's kind of my soundboard, because a lot of those charter captains, I've got 2 pro staff guys. I got Kevin, and then I got Chad Hodges from 4-league charter fishing. Those guys are kind of like my soundboard, they obviously do a lot of fishing because that's what they do professionally. And, me, I can get out there on the weekends and, try them out. But really what I'm looking for is something that's going to perform the way that it should perform. And, that the quality, the durability is there. I don't want to make something that, I even say it, if you go to my website, banditcustomrods.com, I say, I don't want to see this rod again. So when I build it, I don't want to see it again. Of course, I got a warranty, but when I build them, I want them to go out the door with the idea that I don't ever see them again. Unless you want to buy another one, which I'm fine with that too.
There is always that. Well, I met American Tackle at ICAST last year, and it's kind of weird that we're talking about this now, because I've learned a little bit about rod making through the podcast. I've learned a little bit from you when we were talking face to face. And when you mentioned American Tackle and you were talking about the whole thing, all I could see was the rack of blanks and the different sizes. And there was there was a blank for everything. But the way that the team talked about all their equipment, talked about how they do their ordering, how they support staff, or support the rod makers and stuff like that, and the small businesses, it just made it even more of a, damn, these guys are actually really great people. I never realized how much work that, went into making a custom rod like that on the behind the scenes, if you will, with, supply to end consumer.
Yeah, I mean, those guys, no matter what manufacturer you're going with, it's, there's a gajillion different blanks out there. There's a gajillion different, components. One thing I will say, if you're going to get into rod building, don't buy stuff off eBay and Amazon unless it's an OEM thing that you're going to buy, because I've ran into that a couple of times. Early on, I learned my lesson about buying that stuff. Like, yeah, it's cheap. Well, it's cheap for a reason,
Yes. Not always good.
And then you get the guys who are like, oh, it's just as good. No, it's not. It might last a little while, but it's gonna, likely gonna fail you. And you don't want. I mean, the last thing as a fisherman you want is busted gear at the wrong time. I mean, busted gear is part of the game. If you're playing the game, you're breaking stuff. It is what it is. I'm fortunate in the sense that if I break something, I'm the guy that just fixes it. But yeah, it's American Tackles. Those guys are solid. Rain Shadow, Batson Enterprises are solid. I'm mentioning 2 competitors right now. So, but I they're both great companies, and I think as far as the blanks are concerned, they're some of my favorites.
Perfect.
I will say, like, there are other blanks out there that I've used that I'm kind of subjective on, and I won't call them out necessarily, but there's some name brands out there that I'm kind of like, this works well. This blank line that they have works really well for this, but I won't buy anything else, because when you get into graphite blanks, there's different, what they call, modulus, and it has to do with the strain of the graphite and stuff like that. I'm not a scientist, but what I do know about it is that the higher the strain, the more likely you're going to run into a scenario where that thing's going to snap. If you don't fish it correctly, right? And it also comes down to building it correctly. But there are better high modulus blanks out there than others. I'll say that. That there's ones that are more durable, I would say. And one of the questions that I ask my customers, is how hard are you on gear? And
that's a good question too to ask.
Well, the last thing you want is me to build some Ferrari of a rod, and you end up going mudding with it. You know what I mean? And then you go, it's broken. It's like, well, yeah, because
what did you think was going to happen? You don't
with the Ferrari.
Yeah, you don't do the Jeep trail in the Ferrari. That's never a recommendation for good things to end.
But the thing is if you say I'm hard on gear, we can tweak that. We can figure it out. There's ways. There's different. There's different types of rods out there. There's some composite stuff out there that's really cool. That's a little bit more durable. There's we could go straight glass. E-glass, S-glass, stuff like that, and kind of tailor the fact that you're hard on gear to a custom configuration that's going to help you to catch more fish, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. For me, the art's cool. I got this Mahi custom painted. I custom paint rods, Mahi custom painted rod. But at the end of the day, for me, all that matters is this thing going to do for Seth and Sammy what we planned on it doing? And I'm supremely confident because this is the same one that I fish when I'm up here. But that's all really I'm concerned about. The art and stuff, like, that's kind of secondary to the whole thing. I want something that you're going to love. You're going to love the way it looks. You're going to love the way it casts. You're going to love the way it catches fish. And a lot of it comes down to the blank, choosing that blank.
See, and I just learned about that recently.
If you want to drive yourself.
We must have had a delay. I apologize. I stepped on you there. I apologize. Go ahead.
You're good, man. You're good. Go ahead.
That delay was longer than what we had before. I apologize. Yep. All right. Well, there's no editing on this kind of video, so sorry. Y'all get to see what it's really like. Welcome to it. We'll ask you the last two questions here. We'll do the first one for the rod making, then we'll go into the closing side here. What is the advantage of a custom rod? Now, you to me have already kind of answered this by saying you're getting the rod that you're trying to fish for. You brought that up, especially when you're talking about the hard side of, hey, if you're hard on gear, just tell me. All good. But the other thing that I'm guessing here, and I'll not trying to put words in your mouth, I'm just kind of preloading myself here to make sure that my brain's right. You're going to be able to get what you want to happen, but sometimes you don't know what you want, I'm guessing. And I'm wondering, do you run into that a lot?
All the time. So I actually I respectfully turn people away sometimes, where I'm like, listen, if you're going to invest the money in a custom rod, I want you to put some thought into it, and we can work together. Right, sitting down and kind of figuring out, okay, what are you looking to target with this? If we're talking about fishing the surf, length of a surf rod is very important, depending on what you're going to do. Lure weight, because that affects castability. What weights are you tossing? What kind of fish are you targeting? Obviously, if you're targeting, 800-pound hammerhead off the beach. That's going to be a very different setup than if you're, fishing, if you're fishing pompano down in, North Florida when they're running. It's a different. You got different applications, even when you get into like bull redfish, right? So like Tom has his particular flavor of surf rod blanks that he really likes, that we built for, that I built for Caroline, and I'm actually getting ready to build their some of their surf camp rods for when they do surf camps, and those are all going to be Team Rain Shadow, Batson Enterprises ones. But those, you know, with rod blanks, it's with any kind of fishing, right? You're going to get exactly what you want, but you got to know what you want first. So I'm not poo-pooing the guy who just, you know, fishes the pier. We have rods for that, right? It's just knowing, you got to know your craft, right? So if you're going to really get serious into fishing and spend the money on a custom rod, you got to kind of know what you want, essentially.
And that makes a lot of sense. What is a common misconception about custom rods?
That they're really expensive. That's actually a misconception, right? They're not. So and this is subjective to the type of blank, you know, the type of rod that I'm building. When you get into surf rods, you're talking a little bit more money. When you're talking about like inshore rods, even some offshore stuff, because when you're talking offshore rods, you're talking e-glass blanks, and e-glass blanks aren't that expensive. But then you have other component costs, like especially if you want roller guides. Like roller guides ain't cheap, right? But for your standard like inshore, even like light surf rod, it's really, I like to say to people, I have, and you name like I'm going to throw Gene Loomis out there, right? Because people always say, oh, the quality of Gene Loomis. So you're going to get better quality with me and a better warranty with me than if you go with one of these major rod manufacturers. Number one, you're going to get a rod that looks like you want it to look, or there's some type of art on there, right? And you're going to get that same, if not better, level of quality. Because rod manufacturers, one thing people have to understand about them is they're in the business of obviously cranking out as many rods as they can at a certain level of quality, right? So what you get with me, just as an example, is I at minimum do 2 coats of epoxy on the guides. So I do a coat to soak the threads and really get that guide kind of cinched down. And then I do a coat, which is more of like the aesthetic coat where you get that kind of, you know, that sheen over the top. Whereas if you went down to, and if you want to drive yourself completely nuts,
No.
you get yourself a guide alignment tool like this, and you go down to your sporting goods store. They'll probably kick you out for doing this. And you put the guide alignment tool in the reel seat and you look and you see how bad those guides are jacked up. It will drive you nuts. And what I tell people is, you know, because you'll see guys, and you know, I've observed this human behavior at places like Walmart and Academy and stuff. They'll pick a rod up and they'll start whipping it around, right? They'll do the whole, like, because they're concerned about the action, right? The action's only like half the game, right? The other half the game is getting the bait where it needs to go.
Yep.
Right? So the biggest thing that's going to slow you down as far as casting is whether those guides are aligned correctly. Right? And no one ever looks at that, right? I mean, I'm sure there's guys out there, weirdos like me, that'll go look. You know, me, I don't go buy rods anymore. So I'll go to Academy just to get a feel of what like a company like Lubes, what their quality looks like. And I'm not saying their quality is bad, but I'll pick one of their rods up and I'll look down the barrel on it and see, you know, what type of guide configuration they use, and are they using match style? Are they using concept? You know, just different types of styles of how you set up guides. And I'll look at their guide alignment and I'll be able to tell, like, would I buy this rod if I was, you know, if I didn't build them? And what you'll find is, I'm just spitballing this, right? I bet you half the rods that you pick up off the rack, the guides aren't lined up right, and nobody ever pays attention to it. And that's the other half of the game, right? It's like the action of the rod, because you want it to do what you want it to do, but those guides, because that's the one thing that's going to affect your castability, is whether those guides are lined up correctly or not.
Yeah, because that's where all I mean, that's a big chunk of your drag is on that launch. The braid running through it. That's resistance. It's not just air. Yeah, having that in the line would be good. I mean, granted, it's cool seeing those guys that do the corkscrew on the way out, but I don't want to cast that. That just doesn't sound like fun. So, but great points on that.
Which guides are you talking about?
So I saw one not too long ago where the first guide was in the standard position on the bottom. Then the next one twisted. The next one twisted. The guy.
Oh, you're talking about acid wraps. So
yeah,
that's how I do conventionals, and most of the time, like I've got a charter captain who's got a Josh Cook. He's got a set of bull redfish rods, and he doesn't have any problem casting them.
Really?
They cast just like any other conventional. The problem is it's a conventional, right?
Okay, so but if it's conventional, you don't got to worry about the whip. You're straight lining out, so makes sense there. But yeah, those were always cool, and I was like, I could never cast that. It would be 10 yards out. It would just be a mess. But because I'm a spinner, not a conventional.
I wish I had. Literally, one just left my shop today. So
hey, good job.
If you want to know about what I'm talking about with the spiral wrap, acid wrap, the reason why you can't buy them is because they're not easy to make. So like as far as like going down to a tackle shop and looking for a spiral wrapped or an acid wrapped rod, you're going to have a hard time finding one. And it's usually going to be a small batch shop or a custom shop that does it for you. There is a company now, and I forget the name of it, but they make bass rods that are spiral wrapped or acid wrapped. So,
I gotta remember it's acid wrap, not spiral. I will remember, I promise.
No, it's both. So
okay.
It's also called the Roberts wrap. There's a number of different names for it. The acid wrap is my favorite because, as the legend goes, the guy who invented it allegedly was high on acid when he came up with it. So that's why
of course he was. Of course he was.
Who comes up with ideas like that sober? I don't know.
Apparently not. I mean, that's a whole different podcast episode right there. You want to go down that route. All right. Well, let's get you into the last set of questions here and get you away for the night, because I was already late calling you and I feel horrible about it still. It sucks. I was UA. I should be burned.
Good stuff.
I'm glad you're here, man. I love seeing you again. I can't wait to come back, and I know I'll see you when we get up to Georgia, but I'm excited to see you again. I really am. What knowledge would you give to a brand new angler starting out in this game?
Your best bet is your work ethic coupled with a good human source network. And human source network meaning like people that it's friends that you fish with. That's at the end of the day, that's what it's really all about. Like some of my best days were fishing with either family or friends. Have I had epic days by myself? Sure. But it's always good to have somebody with you. And then also putting in the work. There's something to be said about that. I think you get a lot farther in the community by putting in the work and, working through the frustration. I think a lot of people, when they first start fishing, what turns people away is that it can be utterly a frustrating thing, right? I think, if you stick with it and you put the work in, good things are going to happen. Certainly good things have happened to me by putting in the time. And then, it goes into the next part where it's like, when you put in the work, people recognize that you put in the work and they recognize that you have something to bring to the table. And then you start getting more information from others, right? As opposed to just being the guy that's like, hey, give me the numbers. Where is he fishing? Where is their fishing? The guy that follows other boats, that kind of guy. Or like, well, you'll have a completely open set of beach and some dude plops up right next to you just because he saw you catch a fish. Nobody likes that guy. Don't be that guy. Put the work in, figure it out, and you'll be a lot more successful in the long run, because it's all about you know, that whole thing like teach a man to fish, you know,
Yeah.
that adage. I think it's the same where if you're self-teaching yourself how to fish, you're and doing the research and getting these ideas and really paying attention to some of the patterns that you see out on the water, you can replicate those things later on and be successful in any situation. Are you going to have frustrating days? Yeah, you are. I mean, that's just the name of the game. It is what it is. It's fishing. That's what they call fishing, not catching, right, Brian?
Yeah, yeah, and it's painful every time. It's like, damn it, just get on the hook. Not asking much.
Just give me a nibble. Give me a sign.
Give me something.
Yeah.
Let me know there's life here.
Yeah, just let me know. I'm good with a crab. Let's have a crab. Eat my bait. You know, let's go with that. At least that's exciting.
I mean, if crab got on from if I reeled in a crab, I'll admit it, I'd be that guy. You're in half. Your claws now gone. Your knuckles are now mine. Get out there. Now you're bringing me something, jerk. Make you pay for it. What do you recommend to someone coming to your area to fish for the very first time that has never been there before they even try to start fishing?
There's a bunch of online resources. So like the Georgia saltwater fishing community, that's I think the largest Facebook group that we have for Southeast Georgia. They've got over 10,000 members. Again, you got to be it's not getting on there and asking the bait shop question like what's biting. No, get on there and tell people where you're going, what you're planning on doing when you get there, what you're trying to target. And I think a lot of folks on that page are, I haven't run into any folks that are, real jerks on that page. Every now and again you get somebody, but I'm one of the admin on it, so I ban people like that.
I love that.
Yeah. You want to get sideways and give some new guy a hard time. Like this is not the place to do it. You can go to the land-based shark fishing page and do that all day. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I do.
Yeah.
It's like talking to myself right now. Like I'm one of the admins for Panhandle Surf Fishing. Same thing. Oh, snook candy. Bye. Deleted and gone. Oh, you should have done this. No problem. Delete it. Goodbye.
Yeah.
No need for that. Crap.
If you want a healthy community, like just don't be like that. But you get on there, exactly what you're doing, not like the old bait shop question, like what's biting. No, number one, nobody's going to answer that. We always used to have, because in New York it was completely savage, right? When we would have, because we'd have this period of time, like of we'll say like kind of pensive aggravation, where it was like it was too cold to get on the boat to go fishing, but it wasn't cold enough that there was ice on the water. So you would get these guys that they get on the ice fishing pages and they'd be like, "Where's the ice at? Where's the ice at?" And then you invariably get one guy who's like, "Go check yourself, man. Drive out there. If I found the ice, do you think I'm going to tell you? But it's just get on there, tell people what you're doing. I mean, the thing with down here that I found is there's not as many secrets as there was like where we're from, Connecticut.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to kiss the ring of some old, Quint like codger to get any kind of information about, fishing spots and stuff where we're from. Like they're so tight-lipped, you know what I mean? But down here, people are more than willing to help you out. Just like don't be a jerk about it,
Yeah, I mean, hey, this is my show. I can say it. Don't be a dick.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah. Welcome, everybody. You're welcome. Be that. All right. Last question of the episode, and we'll get you out of here, Brian. What's next for you?
So my big thing right now is I just got my boat back on the water. Well, it hasn't been on the water yet. I did a complete rewire of my dash. My next thing is kind of twofold. I got to get out with Seth and Kevin and do some of that crazy shark fishing stuff. I'm looking forward to the running the bulls. I've told myself that I'm actually going to fish it this year.
I've been a
sponsor since it started. but I haven't actually fished it. So I think I'm going to fish it. I'm going to at least try and get out there this year and fish it, or at least help Tom out with some of the stuff that he's got going on. Usually I'm so burnt out with building rods by that point for that event that I don't want anything to do with fishing for a week or two, but I'm going to really make an effort. And then as far as the business goes, I've got plans to put up a workshop on the property here that it's kind of going to double. It's my boat plus, woodworking stuff, which I have to keep, with this garage, I have to keep stored away for the most part. Obviously I can't do woodworking in here because dust is bad for rod building.
Yeah, it doesn't go very well with epoxy.
No, it does not. I used to have we had a cat that lived in here, Jenny, and Jenny was cool to have around, but I would constantly fight the fur. So I actually had to buy like an industrial air filter system for the garage, so that way I didn't get any more fur in the rods. If anybody out there owns my rods and is listening, there's a good chance there's Jenny fur somewhere in your rod. And if you're catching fish, it's probably good luck. But Jenny went missing. She was an outdoor cat. She went missing a number of months ago. And but one of the things I loved that cat. She was cool. But one of the things I don't miss is having to deal with all the fur and everything that she had. If she came back, I'd welcome her back. But I'm like, oh man, I gotta run the industrial strength machine. But one of the things I want to put a shop up and have. I want to have building, so rod building, or I want a building area, or like a wrapping area. I want like a kind of a dirty area where I do like some of the, like I'll cut planks just to keep the dust down. Right. I want to be able to, I want my own paint booth. So an area to paint rod blanks with, proper ventilation and everything. Because right now, like I gotta pick my days, and it's a whole process to paint blanks. They turn out great, but it's just a whole process. And then, obviously a finishing area for epoxy, and having each one of those areas kind of walled off, and obviously climate controlled, because one of the big things with epoxy is relative humidity and temperature is a big problem. That was one of the biggest things that when I moved down here to Georgia that I had to get used to was laying epoxy in upstate New York was different than laying epoxy in South Georgia. It took a little while to figure it out, but I did. So,
well, seriously, Brian, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. Lots of good stuff tonight. Just going nuts. I'm loving it. Thank you for all the things you've done for that kid community too, with Kids Can Fish. There's a lot of kids and a lot of people too that don't realize how good it is at the rod they got. So, well, not yet maybe, but thank you for the things you're doing, man. You're making great rods, and you're a hell of a human being. So I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
All right, sir. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I hope this was fun for you, because it was fun for me. Custom rods are always one of those things that I'm like, man, I don't know. Do I want one? Yeah, of course I want one. Do I need one? Needs relative. But probably one day I need to get my hands on one. You've been listening to Finding Nemo Surf Fishing. Hope you're doing well. Enjoy yourself. Take care. We'll talk to you next week. I am out of here.